Before the stadium lights, before the couture front rows, there was a girl who measured her life in melodies. Roseanne Park didn't look like a future global icon. She looked like a student with a guitar, a quiet voice, and a habit of disappearing into music when the world felt too loud. In Australia and New Zealand, her childhood wasn't built on fame. It was built on practice, piano keys, chords, breath control, the private obsession of getting one note right until it sounded like truth. Then the movie cut happens. The moment her life splits. A YG audition in Sydney. One room, one microphone, one song that had to carry everything. Her fear, her hope, her hunger to be seen. She wasn't auditioning for a hobby. She was auditioning for a different destiny. Because if she got chosen, she'd leave school, leave friends, leave the version of herself that still belonged to ordinary life. And if she wasn't chosen, she'd go back to class the next day pretending nothing happened, while the dream quietly rotted inside her. That's the paradox of Rosé's story. The voice that sounds soft is built from hard decisions. She becomes famous later for vulnerability, the tremble in her tone, the emotion that feels raw. But the truth is, vulnerability on stage is never free. It's a skill, a discipline, a wound you learn to turn into art without letting it swallow you. This is not a Wikipedia biography. This is a cinematic rise, a girl who grew up outside Korea, chasing sound more than spotlight, stepping into a machine that would demand perfection and still call her effortless. The question that pulls you forward isn't whether she makes it. She does. The question is, what did she have to give up to keep that voice alive at the top? Roseanne Park grew up with a split identity before she ever became an idol. Born in New Zealand and raised in Australia, she lived in the in-between, close enough to Korean culture through family, far enough to feel like an outsider in every room. That in-between shapes a person. It teaches you to adapt quickly, to read people fast, to hold your emotions in a neat place so you don't look too confused. And for Rosé, music became the safest language. When words felt awkward, melody didn't. Her early life wasn't built around celebrity fantasy. It was built around routine, school, family, and the steady pull of instruments, piano, then guitar, then the voice that people would later call unique, fragile, signature. But signatures don't appear by accident. They're created through repetition. She practiced like someone trying to prove a private point, that she could turn feelings into sound. In school, she wasn't the loudest kid. She was the kid whose talent made others pause, the kind of student who sings one time at an event, and suddenly teachers remember her name. And that's the dangerous moment in any origin story, when a dream stops being imaginary and becomes realistic enough to hurt. Because if you can really be something special, then you can also really fail at it. Rosé's voice became her identity early, and identity is heavy when you're still young. It makes you afraid to be ordinary, afraid to waste potential. It also makes you vulnerable to the one thing every artist faces before the breakthrough: choice. Stay in a normal life that feels safe but small, or jump toward a future that might reject you completely. The Sydney audition wasn't just an audition, it was a border crossing. If she passed, she would leave behind a teenage life. Friends, school rhythms, the comfort of knowing what tomorrow looks like. If she failed, she would have to return to class and pretend that her whole heart didn't just get evaluated in a few minutes. This is why that audition matters so much in the narrative. It's the moment she stops being a girl who loves music and becomes a girl who is willing to risk everything for it. And when she was chosen, the before fame chapter ended instantly, not with celebration, but with silence. A suitcase, a flight, a new country, a new language, a company building that doesn't care how homesick you are, only how consistent you can be. Her life became smaller and stricter at the exact moment her future became bigger. Part 2 ends with that contradiction. Rosé's world expands, but her freedom shrinks. She's not famous yet. She doesn't have BLACKPINK. She doesn't have the stage. She only has a voice, a dream, and the decision that cuts her life into two, before Korea and after. Korea didn't welcome Rosé with fireworks, it welcomed her with rules. The trainee system is not a place where talent is celebrated, it's a place where talent is measured, repeated, corrected, and rebuilt until it becomes predictable. For a girl who grew up expressing herself through music, that was the first real shock. Emotion alone isn't enough here. Emotion has to be controlled, timed, delivered on command. Days turned into practice room nights. Korean language classes mixed with vocal drills. The loneliness wasn't dramatic, it was constant. And that constant pressure shapes a performer in two ways. Either you harden, or you learn to turn softness into strength. Rosé did the second. Her early spotlight didn't come from the public yet, it came from inside the company. Trainers notice the voice that doesn't sound like anyone else. Producers notice the tone that can carry a chorus without shouting. And Rosé's voice had a strange power. It sounded fragile, but it held weight. She could make a line feel like a confession, and that kind of tone is rare in an industry built on perfection. Slowly, the trainee label started changing into something more dangerous. The one with the signature. The one the company can build a sound around. Then came the first crack in the wall between trainee life and the outside world. Pre-debut content, songs, snippets, teasers, began circulating among fans who were hungry for anything labeled YG's next. This is where her name started spreading before she even had a stage. People didn't know her personality yet, but they recognized the voice. They replayed short clips like evidence. They argued about who she was. That's the weird cruelty of pre-debut fame. Strangers start forming opinions about you before you're allowed to introduce yourself. And when the official reveal finally approached, the pressure doubled. Because being teased as the next big thing is not the same as debuting. A teaser creates expectation. A debut must satisfy it. Rosé entered that final stretch carrying a quiet fear every trainee understands. What if the image they're building is bigger than the person I actually am? Yet the irony is that this fear also sharpened her. It pushed her deeper into craft. Cleaner vocal runs, steadier live tone, more control over emotion. By the time the world was ready to meet her, Rosé wasn't just a trainee with a pretty voice. She was a voice that felt like a brand. Part 3 ends right before the door opens. The last moment where she's still mostly invisible, still mostly unknown, but already being heard. And once the world hears you, you don't get to be small again. When BLACKPINK debuted, Rosé didn't need a long introduction. Her voice did it for her. In the earliest stages, the group's power came from contrast, 4 different energies locked into one identity, and Rosé became the emotional color inside that contrast. The moment she sang, the performance suddenly had a pulse, not louder, not bigger, deeper. Her tone cut through the noise with something that felt human, almost fragile, like a secret being told in public. As the group's fame accelerated, Rosé's signature voice turned into a global calling card. Clips of live moments spread because people could feel her. The way she held a note, the way she pushed breath through emotion, the way her voice sounded like it was breaking without actually breaking. Fans didn't just watch, they replayed. And replaying is how icons are built in the internet era, the same 10 seconds again and again, until it becomes legend. Then the stages got bigger. World tours transformed her from the girl with the beautiful tone into a performer who could command arenas. Coachella-level crowds, festival energy, cameras catching her from every angle. This was where she proved she wasn't only a studio voice. She could deliver live in chaos. She could hold her center while thousands screamed. That's the moment an idol becomes a true global artist, when the performance doesn't depend on perfect conditions, only on presence. But Rosé's breakthrough wasn't only music, it was identity. The offstage version of her, airport looks, candid photos, interviews in English, made her feel international in a way audiences everywhere could access. She wasn't just K-pop, she was a bridge. A Korean-Australian voice in a Korean group dominating global charts. That cross-cultural accessibility helped her fandom grow beyond borders and languages. And then came the solo era. When Rosé released her own music, the world finally heard what BLACKPINK couldn't fully show, her private tone, the sound of someone who doesn't need to shout to be powerful. Her solo work framed her not as a member, but as a storyteller, someone who could carry heartbreak, longing, and ambition on her own shoulders. For Rosé, the explosion wasn't about becoming louder, it was about becoming clearer. Part 4 ends here. Rosé at peak visibility, her voice recognized worldwide, her image everywhere, from stages to fashion events. And at that level, fame stops being admiration and starts becoming surveillance. Because the bigger you get, the more people watch, not just to love you, but to catch you slipping. At the level Rosé reached, drama doesn't need to come from her actions. Sometimes it comes from what other people do around her. Then the internet turns it into a verdict anyway. In 2025, one of the most viral moments wasn't a performance mistake or a leaked scandal. It was a photo, a group image tied to Paris Fashion Week that sparked backlash when people noticed Rosé had been cropped out. The reason it hit so hard wasn't just a bad edit. It touched a bigger nerve: visibility, respect, and how quickly the world is willing to erase someone, especially when they're part of a global group but still treated like an accessory by outsiders. Within hours, the story became bigger than fashion. It turned into a cultural argument about bias, representation, and the way fandoms protect what mainstream media mishandles. Screenshots spread faster than clarifications. Before any official explanation could settle, the internet had already decided how to feel. And even when apologies appear, they don't fully undo what's already been imprinted. The image of Rosé being cut out, literally and symbolically, from a moment she had earned the right to stand in. Then, only months later, a different kind of drama exploded, one that proves how intense Rosé's visibility has become. A fake Rosé controversy at a BLACKPINK pop-up turned into a spectacle when a Chinese influencer was accused of impersonating her. It sounds absurd until you realize what it reveals. Rosé's face is so recognizable that strangers can weaponize resemblance, styling, and camera angles to manufacture presence. Social media posts spread. People argued over whether it was harmless fandom or deliberate deception. The pop-up event, meant to celebrate BLACKPINK, became a battleground for identity, authenticity, and obsession. And for Rosé, even though she wasn't the one acting, the drama still fed off her name. That's the cost of being a global icon. Your image becomes a currency people spend without your permission. Your existence becomes a template others can copy, cosplay, exploit, and the chaos still circles back to you. And then comes the most predictable wave in modern celebrity life: dating rumors. With Rosé, the rumors around Evan Mock have been fueled by the internet's favorite ingredients: street photos, spotted together posts, and the kind of timeline building that turns coincidence into certainty. The public doesn't just wonder, it investigates: where they were seen, who followed who, why comments get turned off, what a private photo might imply. The truth is, the rumor itself becomes the story, because the audience likes romance drama the way it likes episodes. But Rosé's narrative has always been built on something softer than scandal: music, voice, emotion, and that creates the real tension of her fame. Her art invites intimacy, but her celebrity punishes intimacy. She's expected to be open enough to feel real, yet private enough to remain perfect. Part 5 ends on that contradiction. Rosé isn't just managing a career, she's managing what the world thinks it's allowed to own. Then she was Roseanne, an overseas kid with a guitar, practicing in quiet rooms where nobody filmed her and nobody cared about branding. Music wasn't a career plan yet. It was protection, a place to hide, to breathe, to feel safe inside sound. Now she's Rosé, a global name, a stadium voice, a fashion front-row regular, watched so closely that even someone else's photo edit can become a headline, and even a rumor can become a timeline. That's the real then versus now, not fame versus obscurity, privacy versus surveillance. Rosé's voice invites intimacy. It sounds like confession, and that's why the world gets confused. When an artist sounds personal, strangers assume they deserve access to her personal life. They don't just stream the song. They try to own the person. But the payoff of her story is rare. Despite the noise, controversies she didn't start, rumors she never confirmed, She didn't harden into a product. She learned how to keep the softness without letting it destroy her. She kept showing up where it matters, in live vocals, in studio work, in moments that prove the core of her identity was never drama. It was craft. In the end, what survives isn't the discourse. It's the voice that started everything, still honest, still hers.